Somewhere in the deep, turbulent waters of the Bay of Bengal, there is a small island you are strictly forbidden to visit. You cannot go there because of bureaucratic red tape, lack of government permits, or restricted military zones. You cannot go there because the people who live on its shores will violently, without hesitation, end your life. They have fired showers of arrows at military rescue helicopters. They have executed a misguided American missionary who came bearing gifts and hymns, and they have successfully repelled every single attempt at sustained human contact for as long as recorded history has been trying. The world, after centuries of bloodshed and failure, has largely taken the hint. We call them the Sentinelese, named after North Sentinel Island, a name they had entirely no part in choosing. No linguist has ever decoded a single word of their language, and no anthropologist has ever sat inside their homes. Yet modern science has finally found a different way into their world. Not through forced contact, and not through diplomacy, through DNA. The same genetic technology that has been actively rewriting our understanding of prehistoric times is now telling us something extraordinary about this terrifying, isolated island. What it reveals doesn't just explain the hostility of one remote tribe. It fundamentally changes the story of how the human race spread across the planet. From the sky, North Sentinel Island looks like a geographical accident. 60 square kilometers of dense, impenetrable tropical canopy rising out of the ocean, completely ringed by razor-sharp coral reefs that have shredded multiple ships. From the water, it looks like a fortress that does not want you. The population estimates range wildly from 50 to 400 individuals, a massive statistical spread that tells you exactly how little direct observation has ever been possible. Yet, what we can observe from a safe distance defies the primitive Stone Age stereotypes. The Sentinelese are healthy, highly active, and not starving. Their waters are teeming with fish and turtles, and their forests are rich with wild boar. Their technology is consistently, almost comically, underestimated by the outside world. They are often called a Stone Age people, but that is entirely inaccurate. They work iron. They don't smelt it from ore. They scavenge it. For centuries, shipwrecks have been delivering raw industrial metal to their pristine beaches. The Sentinelese use hard stone flakes to score the salvaged iron, bending and snapping it until a usable blank emerges, then grinding a lethal edge with abrasive rocks. The result is long, heavy arrows tipped with razor-sharp iron, a design that works equally well for spearing fish and permanently discouraging curious anthropologists. To understand why they shoot first and ask questions never, you have to look at the dark, tragic history of colonial contact. In 1880, a British naval officer named Maurice Portman arrived at North Sentinel with a large, heavily armed expedition. Deep in the thick forest, Portman's men captured an elderly Sentinelese couple and 4 children, dragging them back to Port Blair in the name of science. Stripped of their isolation and exposed to modern pathogens, the 2 adults fell violently ill and died almost immediately. Panicked, the British returned the 4 children to the island shores with gifts, undoubtedly carrying the very diseases their immune systems had completely zero biological framework to fight. Portman later admitted his expedition had accomplished nothing, except inciting sheer terror. He was right. Across the neighboring Andaman Islands, British colonization brought forced labor and epidemics. Within a few decades, indigenous populations that had thrived independently for millennia were dying en masse from measles, syphilis, and malnutrition. The Sentinelese watched none of this directly, but the horrific lesson was passed down through generations. The boundary had been established in blood. Fast forward to November 2018. John Allen Chow, a 26-year-old American missionary, became obsessively fixated on North Sentinel, describing it in his journals as Satan's last stronghold. Ignoring the laws of the Indian government, the warnings of historians, and the island's lethal reputation, he paid local fishermen to smuggle him close to the reef. On his first attempt, he kayaked to the beach and tried to preach. A Sentinelese child fired an arrow directly into the Bible he was holding against his chest. He narrowly escaped, swimming a mile back to the smuggler's boat. Incredibly, he interpreted this near-death experience as spiritual progress. The next morning, he returned to the beach. He did not come back. The fisherman later reported seeing the islanders drag his body along the sand and bury it. Chow was an intruder who ignored an arrow through a Bible. The Sentinelese were simply defending their home. Since 2018, they have been left in complete peace. But here is where the story pivots from bloody contact history to something profoundly scientific. While expeditions were being repelled by iron-tipped arrows, a quiet, groundbreaking investigation was underway on the neighboring Andaman Islands, one that didn't require anyone's permission. Using advanced ancient DNA sequencing methodologies, geneticists began extracting ancient DNA from the teeth and inner ear bones of skeletal remains across the Andaman archipelago. The biological information locked inside these ancient bones demanded serious attention. The DNA revealed that the Andamanese people, and by direct extension the highly isolated Sentinelese, carry ancestry that traces back to some of the very first modern humans to ever leave the African continent. Their genetic lineage does not connect neatly to any modern mainland Asian population. It sits completely apart. It is ancient, remarkably intact, and preserved by violent geography in a way that has almost no parallel anywhere else on Earth. Estimates place their ancestral line on these islands at over 40,000 years. They predate agriculture, they predate the Bronze Age, and they predate every great civilization that has ever risen and collapsed. For generations, outside observers looked at their dark skin and specific facial features and confidently, incorrectly concluded they were of recent African descent. But genetics proved that physical appearance is a massive red herring. Their dark skin is an evolutionary adaptation to intense equatorial sunlight, a biological process called convergent evolution. Genetically, they are far more closely related to East Asian populations than to any group in Africa. What makes the Sentinelese incredibly significant to modern science is precisely the thing that makes them so terrifying to visit. Their complete and unbroken arrow-enforced isolation means their gene pool has never been touched by the massive migration waves that later swept across mainland Asia. Everywhere else on the continent, the ancient genetic signal of the first humans was diluted, absorbed, or completely overwritten by newer populations. But on North Sentinel Island, hiding behind a jagged coral reef and a wall of drawn bows, that original genetic code has been preserved more completely than almost anywhere else on the planet. This DNA essentially solves a massive, decades-old argument among geneticists about how modern humans populated the globe. For most of the 20th century, the dominant model claimed humans left Africa, moved through the Middle East, and slowly walked across the vast Eurasian landmass. But the Andamanese genetics strongly support a radically different theory, the Southern Coastal Dispersal hypothesis. This model proposes that the very first wave of humans out of Africa didn't slowly walk inland. They sprinted along the coastlines. They moved through the Arabian Peninsula, hugged the shores of South Asia, and island hopped through the ocean, exploiting rich marine resources, eventually reaching Australia an astonishing 65,000 years ago. The DNA extracted from the Andaman Islands sits directly in the middle of this ancient superhighway. Ancient DNA from Aboriginal Australians and Papuans shows shared deep ancestry with the Andamanese. It is a biological fingerprint of a rapid coastal migration running all the way from the Bay of Bengal to the Torres Strait, a journey visible only in the genetics, because the ocean washed away their footprints. The Sentinelese represent the most intact surviving node of that entire ancient human network. They are a population that has been sitting on the exact same island since before the global human dispersal was even fully complete. The lethal arrows that have kept the modern world at bay have entirely accidentally preserved an irreplaceable genetic archive. Today, India enforces a strict 3 nautical mile exclusion zone around the island, maintaining a vital eyes-on, hands-off policy. The argument for permanent non-contact is undeniable when you look at the tragic fate of other isolated tribes. When neighboring tribes like the Jarawa were forcibly integrated, given modern medicine, and settled into concrete housing, the outcome was devastating. Populations that had maintained robust health for millennia were suddenly struggling with severe malnutrition, alcohol dependency, and the collapse of their cultural identity. Some travel companies even began running deeply unethical human safaris, paying tribal members in food to dance for wealthy tourists. The Sentinelese, by stark contrast, are thriving. From a distance, observers see healthy physiques, a consistent presence of children, and a society sustaining itself perfectly within the carrying capacity of its environment. They have had everything they need for 40,000 years, without a single drop of outside assistance. We often talk about the zoo hypothesis in astrophysics, the idea that an advanced alien civilization might observe Earth from a distance without interfering. If we were the ones being watched, what would we want them to do? The Sentinelese have already answered that question for themselves, repeatedly, with perfect clarity. Leave them alone. The profound paradox of their DNA is real. The precise science that reveals how vital they are to understanding our shared human history is the exact same science that makes the strongest possible case for never, ever disturbing them. They will almost certainly never know that their ancient DNA is actively rewriting textbooks in laboratories on the other side of the planet. They were fishing those reefs and grinding salvaged iron into lethal weapons long before anyone thought to extract meaning from ancient bones. The isolation that makes them scientifically extraordinary is not a tragic accident. It is a boundary they have actively chosen, defended, and enforced with a lethal consistency that the modern world must finally learn to respect. Thank you for exploring this fascinating genetic mystery with us. If you enjoyed discovering how isolation preserves the deepest secrets of human history, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts below. Should the Sentinelese be left alone forever? Until next time, keep exploring.